Look at that. Marvel just dropped a new trailer for the upcoming Avengers Endgame, and it has us all over here at Screen Rant super excited. Seriously, I've personally boarded the hype train fully at this point, and it is barreling dangerously down the track. So in honor of how hopelessly and insanely giddy we all are at this point, let's take a few minutes here to break the trailer down in all of its nerdy glory. About the first half of this trailer is pretty loaded with shots from previous MCU entries, such as our opening moments that show us the early days of Iron Man's career, as a very forlorn-sounding Tony Stark narrates over top. We can probably safely assume that this voiceover comes from his recording for Pepper Potts that we saw him start at the beginning of the first trailer, especially because of the line,
"Realized I loved you."
Just a little bit of a giveaway there. His voiceover ends on a particularly dour note. As he stares off into space, he states that there are no more surprises, even though he had hoped to pull off one more. $10 says he actually does pull off another surprise. Seeing as how Stark probably isn't going to bite the dust in this film as early as we think this scene is. Or maybe he will, since I and many others on the internet seem to think that time travel will play a role in this film. After that, we see a pair of shots from Captain America's first film as Peggy Carter's line from The Winter Soldier about starting over is heard. As we hear this very appropriate speech, we see a sad Captain America and Hawkeye training, who I assume is his daughter, in archery, as his family seems to be setting up for a picnic in the background. Really sweet imagery, made extremely depressing by the next shot of Black Widow tearing up in the rain while holding his hand. We basically already knew that his family was toast, but this kind of seals it. We see Thor's past next, showing Asgard as it was before all this happened, and then a bunch of people getting snapped out of existence as Thor remarks about how he watched them all die, which is followed by Cap talking about people moving on and how they can't or won't. Probably both. Also, look at that. Black Widow's hair is growing out, with her natural red color overtaking the blonde. We see Scott Lang looking very confused and disturbed as he checks out some missing posters in a deserted looking neighborhood. I guess it is kind of hard to keep up with lawn maintenance after you've ceased to exist. Black Widow and Hawkeye prepare for action as we can hear her voice talking about how they owe it to everyone who is gone to try some plan or another, no matter how small the chance of success. Then Hawkeye looks awesome as he runs down a corridor and dives away from an explosion. This is followed by a very cool shot of Rocket wearing a much more comic accurate looking outfit hanging off the shoulder of what looks like a new War Machine armor. It looks extra bulky and has those vent things on the face mask that honestly kind of look like some tusks. Very cool. We get some new character shots of Cap, Hawkeye, Ant-Man, and Thor, followed by Nebula springing into action. Now this shot is particularly intriguing to me as she is standing in front of what appears to be a smoldering wreck of some kind. Perhaps while trying to make it back to Earth, the ship crashes and Nebula, not recognizing the Avengers, immediately goes into attack mode as soon as she sees them. That's a possibility. Or it could be from the same scene as this one that we see a little bit later, with Cap strapping on his shield and grimacing while standing in front of a similar looking background. There is some hardcore depth of field here, so it's really hard to say for sure, but the overall color palette of the two shots makes me think they could be happening very close to one another. We see Ant-Man use a pencil to launch himself into action, again in a similarly colored scene, suggesting a major battle sequence that involves a lot of heroes, which admittedly we knew was coming. Then we get a close-up of Tony's face as his voiceover says, "Whatever it takes." This leads into the big shot of the trailer, as Captain America, Nebula, Ant-Man, Hawkeye, War Machine, Black Widow, and Tony walk through the hangar we saw in the previous trailer, decked out in new fancy red and white suits. It's interesting to note here that while Rhodes is in his War Machine armor, Tony is not in a suit of his own. Now one could assume that he has a nanotech suit like the one he had in Infinity War, so he doesn't need it on here, but then why wear the bog standard new suit? What he is wearing seems to match up with Hawkeye's, so I'd imagine it isn't some super fancy one that somehow aids his suiting up. Maybe he's sitting out the upcoming fight. Not too sure here. Of course, we also see Scott Scott Lang wearing a normal looking suit, so it could be nothing. There's the logo, then the stinger shot as Thor walks up to Captain Marvel, making her first appearance in the trailer, I might add, standing in the Avengers living room looking set. He holds out his hand next to her face, summoning Stormbreaker, which doesn't even make her flinch. This must have been enough for Thor, as he says, "I like this one," and smiles. And that was the trailer. Whew, there's a lot to unpack here. But I really want to talk about that major battle that is hinted at by a few shots. Notice how in these battle scenes, the heroes are not wearing the fancy matching garb, instead rocking more traditional looking costumes, suggesting that either this sequence takes place after the Hangar Walk of Awesomeness or before. And this could actually be the result of the time travel shenanigans that a lot of people think is going to happen. Perhaps those red and white suits help with the time travel process, and the battle occurs after. Like they all come out of their chronological adventure and team up to fight Thanos, united as one instead of separated like they were the first time around. All we really know is what we have in front of us currently, which is just a really awesome looking trailer. We'll just have to hang on a little bit longer as Endgame hits theaters at the end of April. What do you think is going to happen in Avengers Endgame? What sort of theories do you have about that battle sequence? Let us know down in the comments below, and while you're down there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Screen Rant for even more trailer breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the movies.